to 210202 2B6A through H. Staff finds that daycare home is a listed conditional use for the R1 Single Family Residential District per 21-1403-1 and 5, provided that such facilities shall provide not less than 35 square feet of interior floor area and 50 square feet of outdoor recreation space for each child. In addition, such facilities shall supply adequate off-street parking or other suitable plan for loading and unloading of children so as not to obstruct public streets or create other traffic safety hazards. Applicant will regularly utilize the basement and main levels of the 2,236 square foot single-family dwelling for the daycare business. The property surpasses the minimum square footage of interior floor area and fenced outdoor recreation space required for 12 children per City Ordinance 21-1403-01. Benson is not registered with the state. The applicant submitted the attached written request, site plan, and floor plans, which are in your agenda packet, which reflect compliance or non-compliance with the following ordinance requirements. 210202 2B6A through H are specific rules governing individual conditional uses. This includes ingress, egress of the property, off-street parking and loading, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility. Off-street parking and loading. The property has an approximately 21-foot wide paved driveway parking area, alley access, allowing for a maximum of 2 legal off-street parking spaces. The minimum number of legal-sized and durable surfaced off-street parking spaces required just for the single-family dwelling use is 2. This board may consider requiring additional compliant off-street parking spaces as condition of secondary use approval and to comply with 21-1403-1 for safe loading and unloading of children. It appears that 3 legal off-street parking spaces could be counted if the pavement was extended to include an unpaved 3.5 by 25 foot area adjacent to the alley, approximately right here. Applicant plans to fence the yard this fall or spring. Chapter 2170 is Home Occupations and Standards. Benson has acknowledged by signature her assurance to comply. No signage is proposed at this time. Chapter 2163, Off-Street Parking and Loading Requirements and Engineering Design Standards. This is for off-street parking, and that was detailed previously that when I was talking about the off-street parking and loading. Chapter 2165 is outside storage and display requirements for specific uses. Her outside storage will be typical to the average single-family dwelling. And Chapter 2173, landscape and lighting standards. Her boulevard and infrastructure are compliant. This board must determine if the request shows satisfactory provision and arrangement concerning Chapter 2170, Home Occupations and Standards, 210202 2B6A through H, which is specific rules governing individual conditional uses, and Chapters 2163, 65, and 73. If endorsed, this board may consider imposing any conditions of approval deemed necessary for this secondary use.
Thank you. I want to correct a statement. I said the majority is for the majority. And the Board of Adjustment requires a 2/3 majority vote. We have 7 members, so that would be 5. So in this case, it is a unanimous vote that's needed to pass the variance. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the use. Is the applicant here?
She's not.
Questions we always ask on these daycares: has it been run by the police department, fire department? Any issues at that address or with those occupants?
Yes, and they have no issues.
Okay.
Anything from any neighbors or anything like that?
No neighbors called.
They said they would put up a fence by the end of the year?
Yes.
Okay. That's something that we also look at. Not licensing with the state,
Right.
and the number of children is 6 to 12.
Are they going to have a fence up before they open?
No, actually, she's open right now. She's been approved previously at another location, and they had to move, and in order to keep her clients, she opened her doors, but did this as soon as possible.
And her expectation is to put that fence up, what did she say, between 6 and 12 months?
Yes, I believe she said in her letter, like, this spring, fall or spring.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. McGuire. Discussion?
Should we put a date limit on when she has to have the fence up?
Yeah, I think she said 6 to 12 months was what it was in there, so I assume that would be included in the motion. Yeah, if you'll let them know that. Any other discussion? That we'll vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is the applicant, Shelley Pieper, seeks conditional use to operate a home-based hair salon business from her single-family dwelling at 1706 Washington Drive.
I wanted to bring up, this home does not exist yet. It's a bare lot. And so I just wanted to show you the plan that she submitted. And basically, it shows the floor plan here, also what will be used for the business. Applicant seeks approval to operate a hair salon business from her single-family dwelling to be located in the R2 Single-Family Attached Residential District per 21-1603-1 and 21-1403-5, contingent upon compliance with 21-7001 home occupations, 21-7002 home occupation standards, and specific rules governing individual conditional uses, including but not limited to 21-0202, 2B6A through H. Again, note that this house is not yet constructed. Staff finds that home occupations is a listed conditional use for the R2 Single-Family Attached Residential District per 21-1603-1, which is any conditional use listed in the R1 district, and 21-1403-5, home occupations in accordance with Chapter 2170. Applicant submitted the attached floor plans and site plan, which reflect or do not reflect the following requirements of the ordinance. And when I say attached, I mean in your agenda packet, of course. 21-0202 2B6 through A through H is again specific rules governing individual conditional uses, and this includes ingress, egress to the property, off-street parking and loading, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility, any of those that would apply for this secondary use. You have in your packets, again, the site plan and written request. According to Chapter 2170 Home Occupations and Standards, Piper has acknowledged by signature her assurance to comply. She proposes to utilize less than 25%, approximately 434 square feet of her 2,778 square foot house for the business, and no signage is proposed at this time. Chapter 2163 Off-Street Parking and Loading Requirements and Engineering Design Standards. Dimensions were not provided on the site plan, but it appears that sufficient area exists for 3 legal off-street parking spaces at least. Chapter 2165, outside storage and display requirements for specific uses. There was nothing in her written request or site plan that shows anything that's not typical to the average single-family dwelling. Outside storage was not indicated in the application. Chapter 2173, landscape and lighting standards. Nothing is shown on the site plan as far as boulevard and infrastructure requirements, but they will be fulfilled with the building permit that she gets for the house. This board must determine if the request shows satisfactory provision and arrangement concerning Chapter 2170 Home Occupations and Standards, 210202 specific rules governing individual conditional uses, and Chapters 2163, 65, and 73 as described previously. If endorsed, this board may consider imposing any conditions of approval deemed necessary for this secondary use.
So thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing to see if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the use. As the applicant here?
Jill,
Doesn't appear so.
did you say that when she gets a building permit, she'll have to comply with the sidewalk and boulevard trees and all that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. Stein. Second by Mr. Stonebarger. Discussion. I don't see any issues with it. Looks like it's a new part of town, R2. Yep, plenty of room for parking. Yep.
Is there any reason, Pat, to put a timeline on when these things have to be done? She has several things that didn't get checked, and I'm you know, she said she's going to do them, so, but we've kind of been in one of those deals before where somebody says they're going to get them done, and I'm not questioning the Pipers here. I'm sure their intentions are great, but there are quite a few things, and I wondered if you should say by,
The building permit is a 12-month building permit. How does this tie to the building permit?
Well, she has 1 year to implement this business.
Works just like a building permit. It's a 1 year
Yeah.
variance or conditional use.
And the check marks on your list, the only check mark we typically check is the fact that it can come before you because it is either a listed, permitted, or conditional use that's in the ordinance. The rest of the boxes are for you to check.
And the one thing too is on a conditional use, how that works is they're allowed to operate this
Yeah.
based on the conditions that we approved. We're actually the body that pulls that conditional use from them, so that it would be something that if we go back and find out that they're not meeting, they don't put their fence up, or there's more kids than they said, or they were going to license with the state and they were unlicensed, we're the one that actually initiates the withdrawal of that condition, so. All right.
I do have one question regarding, you said 3 off-street parking spaces?
Yes, it appears that she has at least room for legal parking, either inside or outside of 3 vehicles that don't have to move in order for another one to move out.
Okay, but does that include a span in front of their driveway? Because according to the drawing, it looks like a pretty wide driveway.
Right, it includes, this is their garage area, that I know this is lopsided here, but they can park here, for instance, and here, and one over here,
Okay.
and not have to move another car, so they're considered legal.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I just didn't want to clip them on the backside with a driveway permit.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, Mark would be required to recuse himself, which would not give us a quorum to vote on this, so he's going to withhold this till the next meeting. We need 5.
So, do we table this? If he has to bring it back next meeting, does he have to pay all the registration requirements again or not?
And if we table it, he doesn't.
Okay.
But if we just don't address it,
Okay.
then
So
he
what,
would, right?
so what we recommend is to table it then.
Right.
I need
I
a
make a motion, we
table.
table it.
Got a motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Albertson. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5 is Interlakes Community Action Partnership, permit number 16976, seeking a conditional use to operate a preschool daycare at 1323 9th Avenue Southwest in the C3 Highway Commercial Zone.
I lost my markers here. Oops. Okay, applicant seeks conditional use approval to operate a preschool daycare facility in the C3 Highway Commercial District per 21-2803-11 daycare facility non-residential and per 21-2803-19 other uses, contingent upon compliance with purpose of the C3 zone, which is 21-2801, and specific rules governing individual conditional uses, including but not limited to 21-0202 2B6A through H. Additionally, application was submitted requesting to construct a compliant 2,045 square foot addition onto the existing 9,500 square foot non-conforming commercial building. Said non-conforming primary structure sets as close as 15 feet from the front or west property line where a minimum 40-foot setback is required. The addition is proposed to be constructed approximately 71 feet from the west property line where a minimum 40-foot setback is required. Application was denied because of the following ordinance regulation, which is 210302, prohibiting the alteration and/or enlargement of nonconforming structures. Staff finds that daycare facility non-residential is a listed conditional use for the C3 Highway Commercial District per 21-2803-11, and the applicant proposes that preschool may also be permitted per 21-2803-19, which states that other uses, which in the opinion of the Board of Adjustment are of the same general character as those enumerated in the C3 district, may be allowed. The use in question is, as long as the use in question is being found compliant and in harmony with the purpose of the C3 district. Applicant submitted the attached floor plan and site plan, again in your agenda packets, which reflects or does not reflect the following requirements of the ordinance. 21-0202 2B6A through H. Again, we're dealing with specific rules governing individual conditional uses, which is, ingress, egress of the property, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, utilities, screening if needed. You have in your packets the site plan, which reflects or does not reflect these items. Chapter 2163 is off-street parking and loading requirements and engineering design standards. Again, refer to your site plan. The concrete parking lot exists, and there are some parking space issues, if you will, in that they are shorter than what is now required, but not by much. The applicant proposes to close the northwest access point, and this creates a dead-end situation. That's right here. Again, on your site plan, you can see that they plan to put in a fenced yard play area, and because it would come up like so up here and connect to the building, they want to close this area. Chapter 2165, outside storage and display requirements for specific uses. Outside storage was not indicated on the application, not in the written part, and it doesn't show any extra storage of any unusual things on the site plan. Chapter 2173, landscape and lighting standards. The site plan does not show boulevard requirements as needed. In this area typically does not have compliance with that. The applicant has not requested variances from these boulevard requirements, and this board must determine if satisfactory provision and arrangement has been made concerning 210202 2B6A through H and chapters 2163, 65, and 73. This parcel lacks standard boulevard and infrastructure requirements, the trees, the sidewalk, the trail, from which the applicant has not requested variance. Again, if application is endorsed, this board has the authority to require fulfillment of any and all boulevard infrastructure requirements in conjunction with any structural improvements authorized by building permit, in addition to any other conditions deemed necessary for conditional use approval. I'm going to bring up their site plan. Just to show everyone a better idea of what we're talking about. You can see the playground security fence by this dotted line here. And they show that they're removing the drive approach here. That does leave an approach here, here, and a shared approach here. And one other thing, the traffic flow that was submitted to us for deliveries and the buses shows the buses coming in apparently by this shared driveway, coming through, going west, and deliveries coming to the back.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the conditional use. Jill, it's a two-part process here. First part is a conditional use for the use. Daycare facilities, non-residential, are not allowed in the C3, are not a permitted use in the C3 Highway Commercial District. They're a conditional use. The second half of it is a variance to build onto a non-compliant structure, correct?
Yes, basically, first, actually a preschool is not clearly defined as a conditional use. The daycare non-residential type is, so you'll have to find that preschool also is all right and in harmony with the purpose of the C3 district. And then, yes, the addition that is, the only reason why it's that part is here before you is because the primary structure is non-conforming and they're enlarging it. But the addition itself is compliant.
Say that again, the addition itself is compliant in how?
It meets all setback regulations.
From that, it doesn't exaggerate the non-compliance,
It doesn't encroach further.
right, any
It just
further on that
enlarges
side.
the
Yep, We
nonconformity.
talked about that earlier. Okay. Go ahead, you can state your name and give us a synopsis of what you're doing.
Can you hear me? There. Arlene Weirheim. I'm the Deputy Director of Interlakes Community Action. And we are looking at purchasing this building to move our 80 children that are in Head Start there. We have been in the Grant School, and that's being demolished now. So this year we're allowed to be at the Garfield School. After that, we have no place. We have to either find a place or not serve 80 children in Watertown. So that's why this is the building we've been working with our realtor trying to find. It's the only one we found that would fit our situation. Other than building, that's a lot more cost prohibitive. So we've been working with an architect on this, and he's been overseeing, and Jill's been very helpful.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to say a quick word, if I might. I like the idea. I think it's great where it's at. My only concern is, like what we ran into when the barbecue joint came out there, that now you put a school in and a new facility wants to come in like that has a beer license or something, they would be denied. Can you put in that, if you okay it, can you put in that, being at C3, that it would not have that regulation of that distance?
Didn't we, when we went through this last time, we actually changed the ordinance? I thought we changed the ordinance on this. Two parts of it was when we had a daycare preschool across from a liquor establishment, the discussion was, and I think it ended up that you're not a school. So it didn't apply in the end on that one. And the daycare facility wanted to say that they were a school, yet they truly weren't a school. And then secondly, we ran across this once before where if the school comes in after, or if the school comes in and encroaches into that 300-foot radius, that they cannot trigger that ordinance.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but I guess what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, what if a place wants to come in 200 feet away from here? Are they okay?
Right. Go ahead, Justin, because we talked about it in the C3 specifically, because that's designed.
Yep. It's C3 as well as C1, Mayor. The language reads, this restriction shall not apply when any church, school, boys or girls club, or community-sponsored recreation center is located in a C1 community commercial or C3 highway commercial district.
So the 300-foot radius doesn't apply in the C1 and the C3, because we've run into that a couple of times, and we don't want to handcuff business that's designed in that, and we also don't want to handcuff a school from going into that same jurisdiction. All right. Yeah. Any other questions? Nice use for that building out there. I didn't realize you had that many kids where you were at. And Head
We
Start,
have
just a
80
little.
80 that come to the classroom, and then we also serve family, children in homes,
How old are the Head Start kids?
3 to 5.
3 to 5, so they're kind of a preschool.
This is our biggest place.
Freshman and sophomore year of preschool. All right. Any other questions before I close the open? Anyone else to speak on behalf or against the use? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. Albertson, second by Mr. Stonebarger. Any other discussion? Any concerns? It looked like to me that they've got that approach. It looks like they've got the outside play areas under control, and it looks like it's going to be every bit as good, if not better, than where you are now.
Very much. Well, we have to leave next July, so now we'll just hope we find the funding. Then we
Wonderful.
can buy it. So,
All right.
thank you.
With no further discussion, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, Edward Canas, doing business as Ron Saw Shop. Permit number 16975 is appealing the terms of the zoning ordinance, seeking a relief for the requirements in regard to a non-conforming building at 197 10th Street Northwest in Watertown.
Application was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 4,000 square foot commercial building with an 847.5 0.5 square foot upper level on a substandard 15,000 square foot parcel located in the C3 Highway Commercial District. Said structure is proposed to be constructed 10 feet from the side or north property line where a minimum 20 feet is required and with 11 off-street parking spaces, which are proposed to be positioned 0 feet from the side or south property line where a minimum 5-foot setback is required. Application was denied based on the following ordinance regulations. 210302 prohibits the design and creation of nonconforming structures on nonconforming lots. 211003 is the non-residential height and placement regulations, which I described before. Chapter 2160, all required yards and setbacks shall be open unoccupied space, and no adjacent open space shall be used to satisfy any yard or setback required for any other structure, and no yard setback shall be reduced in dimension below the minimum requirements set forth in the district in which such yard or lot is located. And Chapter 2163, off-street parking and loading requirements. Staff finds that this is a redevelopment project. The existing structure is to be raised, and the proposed commercial building will continue to be used for retail sales and service, which are permitted uses in the C3 Highway Commercial District. Additional to the redevelopment of the nonconforming property with a nonconforming structure, the proposed parking lot layout does not meet minimum requirements per 216302 off-street parking design and maintenance. Number one, minimum parking setbacks from property lines and buildings shall be 5 feet for commercial or industrial uses. Number two, all parking areas shall be surfaced with a durable all-weather surface material. I believe that will be fulfilled. Number four, parking lots shall be in accordance with engineering design standards. Bullet points there explain that according to the proposed parking lot layout, there is only ingress and egress or entrance, only ingress entrance from 10th Street West, and egress or exit traffic is routed out through the alley. A 2.3-foot bumper overhang is not provided for the 60-degree parking spaces on the south side, and 4 90-degree parking spaces west side of the building have no aisle utilizing alley public right-of-way as such. Let me bring up the actual drawing for this while I'm speaking. It'll make it a little easier to understand. Okay, understand that north is to the right here. These are the parking spaces that I was referring to that do not have the required 5-foot setback from this property line. And this is the 10-foot setback for the building that is required to be 20. Okay. These items required per 217304 are not shown on the site plan or addressed in the written request, and that is parking lot lighting, outside dumpsters or other garbage receptacles on the site, and that's supposed to be screened by an opaque wall, according to ordinance. And then there is sufficient buildable area, approximately 4,800 square feet on this 15,000 square foot parcel to develop without variances. Note, the applicant is not requesting variances from landscape and infrastructure requirements, which were not shown on the submitted site plan. Unless otherwise determined by this board, a waiver of right to protest sidewalk trail will be recorded with the building permit at permitting time.
Jill, I have a question. You said there's sufficient buildable space to build the building. Is there space to build a building with all the parking required?
That would take, different ideas of, and I didn't crunch those numbers as far as parking, but according to just the lot size, there is buildable area that could be used without variances. I think Mr. Kangas, I'm not sure if he's here. Do you want to come up?
With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the permit.
I think for some reason he wanted to keep this not parking, but an aisle here. I'm not sure, but you can go ahead and say what you want.
I'm Eddie Kangas with Ron Sawshop. And on that north side, We had been hoping to move the building that way to make room for parking on the south side. On the north side, I have talked to Pizza Ranch and we have agreed on as far as pass-through traffic and during his busy times as far as parking in that area. We've agreed that we can work that out, whether we need to stripe it or not.
The intent with the building, you're going to use the existing building and raise it, did I hear? Or are you taking a whole new building?
Remove the existing.
Remove the existing building and replace it with a new building.
Addressing Mr. Stonebarger's question, I'm not understanding if you can build this building and accommodate parking, and it sounds like you're working on that with the Pizza Ranch gentlemen. Why are you applying for a variance?
To make room for parking more to the south and to keep from, I guess, packing the building up against the north building, or the building to the south of me, sorry.
Because, I heard the same thing where he said, this is a 4,000 square foot building, correct?
Yep.
And you said you can put a 4,800 square foot building on that same footprint? I don't see how you can fit it on there. I
You
mean,
could put it
can't
on,
move
but
it
you
any
couldn't get the
further.
parking.
You couldn't get any parking,
Right.
because
So-
the parking is insufficient in length on the north side. We pushed the building further south, and the parking, we still don't have that 5-foot overhang on the north side, so the parking is just barely enough without that 5-foot overhang, and we're still pushing the building to the south. The problem with it is we're just 5,000 square feet short of building space on that lot. It's a 15,000 square foot lot, so we're kind of handcuffed a little bit by the existing lot size. When you said flow-through traffic on the south side,
Yes, most traffic flows from the east to the west. Like she mentioned, out the alley. And rather than go through
the parking lot,
through the, all the way down the alley to the Cowboy intersection, they typically will go just around the building, through Pizza Ranch's parking
yeah.
lot.
So even
And
though there's
vice
only a
versa.
10-foot setback there, they're still using that and part of the Pizza Ranch to
Yeah,
that area to move through there.
yeah, and that works both ways with, his traffic too. They work both ways. It comes around from his building and out our driveway. And we have visited on this pretty pretty good length, and we can agree on making our driveways work together, but I guess that is between us.
Just for clarity, if that agreement were someday to dissolve, I mean, they do have public access through via the alley over to the Third Avenue, so.
It looks like there's access in both directions, as creatures of habit will take the shortest, easiest way, which. Any other questions for Mr. Kangas from the board? Seeing none, anyone else speak on behalf or against the permit? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion. Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. Albertson. Any other discussion on it? Looks like to me he's tried to improve the property a little bit, and it's a minimum. I mean, I understand there's a building size a person wants, but we're squeezing a little parking here, a little parking there, but it looks like it's something that would work for him.
Right, and to be clear,
And you can ask that.
So what are you thinking about for signage on your buildings?
On the building, I'm figuring on putting a sign on the front of the building. And I would like to have, similar to what we have out there now, at least one standing sign.
But you will be in compliance with the sign ordinance?
Yes.
Okay.
and this variance is all conditional upon the existing building being raised and building a new building. That is to say that the applicant would not be allowed to pick and choose, for example, the parking part of it, but not replace the building. It's all predicated on the building being raised and a new structure being built.
Right. And
Right.
it's a 12-month permit. So, yeah. Any other questions? With that, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Anything in old business, Joe? With that, I'll ask for a motion and a second to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
We'll give you a call. Yep.
Are you ready, Brittany? Yep. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, September 8th, 2016 Watertown City Plan Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Stein.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Stromberger.
Here.
McGuire. Here. And Arnold, Dolly, and Johnson are absent.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Could I get a motion in a second? Motion by Mr. McGuire, second by Mr. Stein. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 18th, 2016 meeting. Could I get a motion? Motion by Mr. Stonebarger, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Third item on the agenda is the vacation of the remaining alley at the J.F. Morris Edition, Block 8.
Okay, so the petitioners, Lawrence Land Company and Watertown Housing and Redevelopment Commission, request to vacate the remaining alley bordering lots 1 and 2 on the west 50-foot of Lot 7 in the J.F. Monks subdivision of lots 12 and 13 of Block 8. The reason the petitioner is requesting vacation is because the alley is not now and never has been open, used, or travel as an alley or public way. That because of location and development in the area. The said east-west alley serves no useful or necessary purpose, is restricting the development of the surrounding area, and is unnecessary for any alley purpose. And so just the facts about it, the stretch of the alley is approximately 50 foot long and 10 foot wide, and then I handed out the amended resolution that we will not be holding a utility easement over the entirety. It'll actually be no utility easement. So it'll be vacated fully.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the vacation.
Well, look who's back.
Mike Lawrence. I'm with Lawrence Land Company. We own the building. One thing I want to ask is, do I need 100% of the vote?
Correct. How it works is we need a simple majority of, let me go back. It is a simple majority of the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission's made up of 7, so 4 will be required, 4 yes votes. And Mr. Albertson can't vote on this because he also votes at the city council.
I'm probably going to ask to have that tabled. I just don't want to take that chance.
Okay, let's.
It's pretty simple, but I've been on this board enough to know.
Agreed. Let's leave the open.
Okay.
Let's leave it open so we can hear through it, hear what you're trying to do. may or may not have to reopen it when we take it off the table next time then.
Okay.
Just a procedural thing, what he's.
What Justin said is when we go into table this, we actually table after the discussion. So,
After this
yep.
discussion,
So-
okay.
So let's hear it out and see what we got going on.
Yeah, we are looking to expand our building footprint, or not our building footprint, but our footprint of the business Harry's inside. We're looking to put patio space on the exterior of the building, which we would like 5 more feet of the alley. We can put the patio on either way, but a useless alley that's not being maintained by anyone at this point.
Have you been maintaining it? The local property owners maintain
They
that
have
as though
maintained
it's
it
their own?
since 1970 is when they 79 something like that is when they built the high rise.
So you wouldn't know it's an alley unless you knew it was an
I
alley?
actually didn't know it was an alley. So
Okay.
thanks,
Shane, any
Jill
utilities,
pointed
anything
that
in
out
there
for
at
me.
all? No services, no utilities?
There's no
No.
public use of that space.
Whatsoever.
Adjacent to that, the Public Utilities has some equipment, but not on that alley as it's.
It's a 10-foot
defined.
alley?
It was a 10-foot wide alley.
It's split 5-5 each side? Each side gets their 5 feet?
That's correct.
Any neighbor concerns, Brandy, over there, when they send out the letters?
Young came in, but he had to leave, but he said that he'd like to speak on it. He was here.
They're worried about parking. A lot of people are worried about our parking situation. As you guys know, the C1 district, if we put a patio back there, we're going to have the exact same amount of off-street parking as more than half the businesses downtown, Watertown Brew Company. You look at Shooters, they have no off-street parking. You look at Docks, they have none of their own off-street parking. You look at Sparky's, they have none of their own off-street parking. So the vacation of this alley does not, in my opinion, reflect parking.
Yeah, that parking's the nature of the C1 beast down there. Yeah, the pros and cons of it, you know. C1's an area where we can actually live above a commercial business. It's the only zone we allow that in, which makes the least sense of all the zones to allow people to live above bars and old buildings. But
Yeah, and we
that's
do
the
have-
nature of the beast of how that works. And parking uptown parking requires everybody to get along.
Yeah, and we do have three tenants that live above us as well.
That's the uptown. Any other questions? Anybody have any concerns on it? I mean, I've always gone with vacations and say the developers, when they develop, they declare right away for public use, and at some point in time, if that's not going to be used for public use, is it the right thing to give it back to the heirs of the people who gave it to us originally? I always thought it was, if it's something that's not going to be used. Go ahead.
Just for clarity, the remaining portion of the alley was previously vacated. I'm testing my memory, and Brandy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in 1973. So really, the rest of this alley has been non-existent for
A long time.
almost 4 decades, so.
And the concern that was going to be raised by the person that left.
Mr. Young.
Yeah. He's concerned because this is used for parking now? I mean,
Correct. I mean, that's what I got, and you'd have to, Randy would probably want to speak on that one.
He was saying that this is his building here, and he was concerned that people would be parking in his lot for the patio adjacent there, because he has tenants that park there.
And I have told my staff, just like I have told everybody that parks there, that, you know, if you're parking on someone else's property, you're going to get towed. I mean, it's just the same thing as we have apartment complexes that you just can't park there. I mean, it's private property. We've had issues with the people at Ledger's. We've clarified it with our staff. There is no parking there.
So, Brandy, were you saying that Mr. Young's concern was that his tenants park in the vacated alley area, or he's concerned that if that is vacated, then people that are parking in the vacated alley space now will be parking in his lot.
He didn't necessarily say if it was vacated. He was just concerned, I think, about people coming to Harry's.
You know, I want to stop one time here quick. We're the Plan Commission. We take a look at land and how it's being used and how it should be used. There's other departments in the city that take care of other disputes that are going on when it comes to who's parking where, how they're parking, what customers are coming and going. That's none of our business. Our business is to look at the dirt and look at the land and look at the land use. And we have a request to vacate some land that's been explained to us that there are no utility easements and no public use of that land. So I don't want to get into a neighborhood. I'm not here to referee a neighborhood match. We have other departments in our city that get paid way more than we do to handle that.
By nature, the C1 district allows people to develop right to the property line, and essentially that's what this not change of use, but change of operations is expanding his footprint to use it up all of the space that he can, and it will displace parking. And those folks, if they do park illegally on somebody else's property, they have the right to have those vehicles towed. These spaces that would be offset will just have to be absorbed in the greater public realm outside of the downtown businesses. So that's what we expect, and I have no problems with that.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak on behalf or against the variance?
Is it on? Yeah. Hi, my name is Mary Goldetti, and I manage the high-rise apartment. I'm with Watertown Housing Authority. And we agreed to the vacation to gain the 5 feet. Our concern has been, and still always is, that we have 60 residential units right next to this property that's asking for the vacation, of which 28 of them are going to be facing this deck area where he is planning on, or this area that's going to be vacated, and he's planning on putting a deck there. Our concern is the noise and the second story of the deck that he plans on building. And we, as a board, my board did meet with Mr. Lawrence. I had 2 board members who met with him, and they had a conversation and they tried to reach a compromise, and with some different things that we were asking for, and there was no compromise. So basically my board agreed in August to do the vacation for that 5 feet. What we would like to see on that second story deck is some sort of noise and privacy screen. I don't know if you guys could put that as part of the variance or vacation. I don't know, but that's our concern. We have 28 residents who actually face the back of our building that will actually face this patio. And the second story apartments are exactly level with his second story deck. So they will be looking right into those second story apartments.
Thank you. Shane, what authority do we have as a board to, from the vacation being completely separate, it would be more from the permitting side. The building permitting
right.
side has the jurisdiction as to what he can and what he can't.
Okay,
We really don't have that,
right.
do we?
As a planning commission,
Right.
this is a non-issue, but as the Board of Adjustment, if you provided a conditional use for the previous business, you may be able to revisit it through that. But as a plan commission, I don't believe that you.
Because what he's saying is that the hat we're wearing here, we're just on a zoning side. The hat we just finished with is the Board of Adjustment, where we issue conditional uses, and beer wine license is a conditional use. So that property does have a conditional use that basically said, when they came to that board to have that use at that address, we said, yes, you can do it under these conditions. If those conditions change, they'll need to come back before us, and that's where we would address that.
Okay, because this deck was not presented at that meeting.
Correct. So, and that would be up through the building, through Kenny's and Jill's
That's
department.
Another meeting.
A second step.
So this will go to the city council
Yep.
if it's approved, and then there's another meeting
Yep.
for a board of adjustments?
Yep.
Is
Well,
that
the
my
vacation goes from here to the city council. When he goes in, if he's building onto that building or doing anything, if it requires a building permit, it will go through that department. And that could require it to come back due to the conditional use it's
Could
underneath.
require it or
But
would
should,
require it?
You guys, the building official is the one who sends those. He takes a look at it and determines whether or not it's required to come back before our board. Go ahead, Jill. You can explain the procedures you guys have up there.
If there's a conditional use that's been granted in the past and there are issues, this board has the right to revisit and adjust their conditions. And for instance, a trigger can be having to have a permit for the deck. And that actually is a change in site plan. So the building official could have the Board of Adjustment
I would think it would.
review that.
I would think it would, because it's a change in the footprint of the building. If Kenny was here, he could tell us directly, but that's the Board of Adjustment side. And like we said, if the conditions that we approved to allow that business to operate there, if they're not abiding by those conditions, then the Board of Adjustment is the one that revisits that with them and talks about the conditions that they agreed to and what's actually happening on the site. So if you're having a problem with them, I would talk to Kenny. And then he'll bring it to our board, the other board.
Because we're okay with a vacation, but that is our concern. And because it wasn't on the original plan back in May, and there's been no compromise to achieve. Just checking with my board members to see if they wanted to talk.
To an existing.
The Housing Authority is controlled by a board. I'm a member of the board and chairman of that board this year.
We need to have you state your name if you could.
Dale
for the record.
Howlett. Now, in July, the board met and we passed a motion to vacate the alley with stipulations. We did meet with Mr. Lawrence. We could agree on most things, but we didn't come to a complete agreement. So the board came back in August and we passed a motion to vacate the alley. We'll take our 5 feet. Mr. Lawrence can have his 5 feet, and that's where we're at. Let's clean up this no man's land and take care of it. We do have plans to move the fence, to do some extra screening in there, and we do have the concern for the second-story deck, if it would go on, that there be adequate, and you've addressed that, so.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else for the open? With that, I'll close the open, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. Stonebarger. From a discussion standpoint, I think we're still talking about the vacation. I think everybody's okay with the vacation. There's some questions that the neighbors have as far as usage goes in there, and I'll talk to Kenny specifically on it to find out how those steps work, so you guys don't feel like, hey, this just got ramrodded through and here we sit. Any other questions? I can't read that. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll check with Ken on that. Any other questions, any other discussions? With that, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is another vacation of a road adjacent to lots 3 and 4 of the Marina Bay subdivision. Oh boy, we got some work to do.
Okay, so the petitioners, Michael and Tammy's. What's that? Yeah, are we good to go?
Yep, go ahead on this one.
Okay. Petitioners Michael and Tammy Stevens request to vacate the remaining road adjacent to lots 3 and 4 in Marina Bay subdivision. This petition is being submitted because the public right-of-way is a dead end without an additional outlet. The owner of the 2 adjacent lots would like to limit access to public use and utilize the existing road as driveway and further use property for future garage. This stretch of the road is approximately 173 foot long and 40 foot wide, and the adjacent land of road proposed to be vacated is all owned by Michael and Tammy Stevens.
That it?
But that was quick. I'm used to Jill. I went out to get something to eat. Okay, go ahead, Shane. I think you know a little bit about this one. You good?
Okay, I would proceed with the public hearing.
Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak in behalf or against the variance.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Kyle Lawler with Haugen Nelson Realty here on behalf of the Stevens. They unfortunately could not be here today. Their request is to vacate the portion that is highlighted in red there. Those 2 lots, they just purchased with the idea that they will be building their year-round home there at some point in the not-too-distant future, but wanted to vacate that road so that, like she said, they could use for private driveway and access. They have had conversation with Municipal Utilities Department as far as utilities and the fire hydrant and all of that's in there, and I think that we have gotten agreement. I know that Mr. Meyer is here on behalf of the utilities, and then we've also had conversation with Mr. Bainan with the street department, and I think that if this board grants the vacation, everybody will be happy with the results.
Thank you. Shane, I had a question. I had it to Rob earlier today as far as how are the vehicles, garbage trucks, snow plows, how are they turning around in there? And if this is vacated, what would the procedure be for them to get in and out of there?
Okay, I think what we would do is ask that one of the conditions of the vacation be that they provide some type of turnaround, maybe an extra driveway parallel to the property line that's goes towards the lake, to allow garbage trucks and snow plows and so forth to turn around in there and get reoriented, going back the opposite way out of the thing. That would be one option that we've considered. And just a point of that's been brought to my attention that should be said is technically the end of this right-of-way has been deemed a public access to the lake. It has not been improved as such, so there is no official boat ramp. There's been a dock out there on the Marina Bay side. I don't know if that's public or not, but public can certainly dock alongside that right away at this point in time and disembark, but there's no parking lot. It's not a developed access. And my answer to that is there is just literally a couple hundred yards south of this location a developed boat ramp. And then there's another one at Memorial Park just to the north of this property. So I did want to make that point that it's technically a public access, but it's not one that's been developed. It's not been highly used, and we have 2 adequate public ramps on either side of this location. So that's not a major concern of ours. And then with that, if we can accommodate the turnaround for the municipal vehicles for the garbage collection and the snowplow, I think we can come to grips with that.
So if the variance is applied, is there still a utility easement there, temporarily a utility easement?
I'll let Mark Meyer
Okay.
with the utilities answer that question.
Sorry. Mark Meyer with Utilities. we've had discussions with the owner and have given them a price to move the utilities to the north lot line. And it sounds like they want to do that, but they wanted to make sure that they owned it and this vacation went through before they sign an agreement with us. So I would ask for an easement to remain, but I don't know if there's any way that you can state it that, so they don't have to come back and vacate the utility easement or not. If you
That's a
go-
legal question.
Because I'm pretty confident they're gonna move it, and I talked to him on the phone today, and he told me they were, but there's no agreement in place that says that he's gonna for sure do it.
Mark, if this vacation went through, how wide or how big of a turnaround would a garbage truck snowplow need to adequately do that?
And I would say a turnaround area, an area established for
Right.
turnaround.
Our motor graders with equipment and stuff, you'd be approaching 30 foot in length. I think the garbage trucks would be the vehicles that would be the hardest to turn around, just for the fact they don't have tight turning radiuses. The motor graders articulate, so we can turn on in a tighter area. But, until we would actually do some research, I can't tell you how deep that would need to be.
But we could say they need to establish a turnaround area
Right.
suitable for
Yeah.
both the garbage and the graders.
Correct. One way to maybe do that would be obtain an easement across that north property line for a certain width and distance back. Either that or have them provide it for us separately, but it is an issue that needs to be worked out. We don't have any specifics at this time, but that, so in other words, if the north 30 feet, say, of the property was an ingress egress easement for public to turn around on, then we would improve it so that they could pull in far enough. They would have to be allowed to back up onto a portion of the remaining driveway of the house. In other words, it would be almost a T shape going into their home. You'd have you got a drawing up, I'll come around.
One second, Justin wanted to answer Mark's question on the easement.
Yes, thinking about this, you think about, the fact that this resolution would be the basis for the easement. Then you'd have to ask yourself, well, what is proof of abandonment of that easement? And that can be shown by actions, deeds, what have you. But ultimately, if it's anything but the document or any other document akin to it that established the easement, you're going to have to go to court to ultimately settle it, or have some sort of understanding amongst the parties, the grantor and the grantee of the easement, that it has been abandoned. But that's going to be informal. We'd need to have a formal way of saying this easement no longer exists, and that would require essentially this body coming back and saying that it no longer exists.
I was just trying to save them a
Sure.
step if possible.
Sure. Well, it's a great thought. I mean, it took me a while to kind of process, the implications of what you were talking about, but it would potentially create more problems than it solves.
Right, and until we have an assigned agreement that says that they're gonna actually pay for it, we need to keep an easement there for what we have.
So in a nutshell, they'll have to come back to vacate the easement.
Yes,
Who
Mr.
owns the
Chairman.
public access? Who owns the public access? We do? I thought maybe it was Game Fish and Parks or something.
No, it's city.
It's city right away, out to the water's edge.
So with this notification, the adjacent property owners got notified, but nobody else in town knows that we're talking about potentially closing a public access to the lake. I'm not sure if I'm in the mood to rule on something like this without the rest of the people in the town knowing what we're trying to do, or potentially going to do.
Would it do any good with an easement for the public to use that, it'd be theirs, but with an easement to use a recorded easement?
For the public access?
Yeah.
Well, that would be impractical for what they're trying to do there.
I understand that, but practically, if you keep on shutting accesses for the public, that's not a good thing either.
No, I'm not disagreeing with the point about the desirability of closing off the public access, but I'm saying if we grant this, if we vacate that road, we've effectively shut off access to that.
There is access on the south side of that too, on the opposite side of the bay there. I mean, that road is an improved road.
Well-
Marina Bay Drive comes in on both sides, north and south of that inlet. And that is
Okay, so the next public lot boat ramp is right here. I mean, it's very, very, very close to.
I understand there's other boat ramps around the lake. However, when you start talking about closing off a public access to the lake, the residents get a little bit testy, and I'm just not sure if I'm willing to rule on this.
There isn't a public access here because of the riprap that's been installed. The riprap stops short up here. That's why it's somewhat of an access, but it's not improved. It's right.
the lot actually, if you look at that, I mean, the lot is, the lake is washed away to the corner of that lot. That pin is gone. That pin right there, that Shane's pointing at, that pin has been washed away. Down, and that channel was added in there years and years and years ago. It's the intent for the current owners to vacate that road. I mean, they're not looking to inhibit the public access because you can still get to it from the south side, which is a paved and improved road. That road that you're talking about, that we're talking about vacating, is maybe 18 to 20 feet wide, gravel. And had conversation with the PD, and the PD used to chase kids out of there, but they haven't had that problem for years because they've gotten that taken care of. They've gotten that nipped in there. So, the lot is there. That road, that gravel road is there, and so that there would have been access to that secondary lot, the very south lot, because it's two lots. So the north lot is lot 3, the south lot is lot 4. So that was a road to access that lot number 4. And they have had conversation with with Rob at the city about, they're okay with doing some sort of access or whatever for street department, garbage, snow removal, trash removal, and all of that. I mean, obviously they, would put that in when they did with whether it be a developer's agreement or when they pulled building permit and when they did the site plan, but that is their request.
Shane, most accesses that drop into the lake, anywhere around the lake where a county road moves in, they're all public accesses. Most of them are not being used right now. Most of them, people wouldn't even know that are there. They look like they're people's yards.
There are several of those, yes.
The city doesn't have, nor has it ever had, any intention to improve this public access. A public access that the city owns would be City Park. Jackson Park.
We actually own that one to the south that I pointed at.
Right, but I mean the improved accesses,
yes.
I would say, are City Park, Jackson Park. The county owns Memorial Park. The state owns Sandy Shores. Linwood, which is the access to the south there, is that city?
I believe that's city.
City maintains that? So there are, but as far as the city goes in their long-range planning, we've never even looked at this as an access of any sort, have we?
Not really, no. So
There's no parking there. There's no ability to, other than
that's
foot
just
traffic.
it.
There's no way you could, the property the city owns doesn't have ample parking to even improve it as an access. And I get what Mr. Stonebarger is saying is, boy, we don't want to we got to be careful. It's a slippery slope when we start giving up public access to lakes, but
I just think the public ought to be informed of what we're doing so they can come in and give public comment to our meeting here, because right now, no one was notified that we're going to close access to the lake. And now, I didn't realize it was a public access to the lake, but if it is, then that's a whole different ballgame as far as I'm concerned.
Just as a point of conversation too, about 2 miles, I'm not sure if it's north or of where this one is, there's a public access that a fellow wanted 3 feet from, for a variance, and the city council is saying, no, not gonna give it to him. He's gotta take his newly wall, he built a wall, and for 3 feet, and it was on a public access, so John may not be too far off on, that's city. That's the city, and they thought that the property was right here, and he's asked for 3 feet, and the answer was buy it from Bernie Hansen then, and let Bernie sell you 3 feet, because you can't have 3 feet from the city, because of just what John is saying. So it may be a good deal to leave it open some way, because when it gets to the city, I think there's been, people are being asked to tear down $50,000, I don't know how much it costs, I shouldn't have said that, but to tear down a really nice wall and a really nice gazebo type deal because of 3 feet out of a 60-foot place there. So they're just saying, that's been established that, no, not going to do it, so you will tear that down because you're on city property. So just I think John might be closer than we think to what.
Okay, I do want to make one additional comment with regard to that, though. Technically, everything along this whole part of Marina Bay is public. So it's not that we're eliminating all public access. We're limiting a portion thereof.
So is there any way the public would be informed before the city council takes action on this?
We could request another public hearing at the council meeting. That could be a recommendation.
We sent out the public notice in the paper,
We can rescind that.
and we do, for city council, we do.
And it's almost semantics on when we say public access, you say,
Okay.
I think in my mind, I'm thinking places where people can go, they can picnic, they can put boats in. There might be a lot more
Okay.
area on the lake that the city owns, a little lake shore.
Let's simplify this a little bit. I think I can. If this goes forward out of here, it needs ratification by the council. We've already got the next public hearing will be at the city council meeting. We're sent out, or we've prepared to launch those notices for that public hearing right now. So on September 19th would be a public hearing carrying this forward for final vote.
I'm not sure, Shane, if we'd be able to make the publication deadline with
We've
it.
released it if this went forward.
Oh,
If this
okay.
goes,
If-
if
oh,
this
we have.
dies here, we rescind those notices. In other words, we've prepared accordingly
Okay.
to make the notification dates, but we can rescind those. I mean, it's all based on what action comes out of this meeting tonight. So, but we are prepared to have a public hearing at the council meeting after this. So I don't know that answers your questions and concerns, John, but it does give the public one more opportunity to weigh in on this process.
Rather, it was the other way around, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so,
Now,
we did send notice, our notice for this public hearing went in the paper public-wide
But
as
no
well.
one mentioned a public access to the lake. It just says this is what we're trying to do.
Well, we don't state verbatim, word for word, what all of the issues are on any of these vacations, but thank you for, I'm glad you're concerned for this process.
I also have another question.
So,
There's two lots there.
Mm-hmm.
Are we hitting the cart before the horse? Should they combine those two lots before we consider the vacation, or should we vacate two lots and then they're going to combine them? I think we should combine the two lots before we
Well,
consider
the issue
vacation.
there is, if we didn't vacate, whether they would combine both lots or not. But we've been told that they're gonna combine it into one parcel.
It's the intent that if the road is vacated, they would combine the lots to do a developer's agreement to combine the two lots. And that way they could build the structure that they wanted to build.
What generally
Still-
what generally triggers that development lot agreement is if you look at those lots, the lot lines, if they're two separate lots, their buildings still have to comply with the setbacks from those lot lines, even though they own both lots. So in more cases than not, they're gonna come in and say, I'm gonna put my house here and I wanna put a detached building here. Well, one of them is gonna require a variance, and normally the building department will go in and say, in the past, what we've done is, we'll do this, but we request a development lot agreement to put the two lots in one. That way, the variance isn't needed, in a
And the
sense.
other part of that is that if they vacate the road and we just, agree to do the turnaround or an area for utilities and for snow and all of that, obviously that's gonna shrink up that north section of that buildable footprint that's in there with the new easement. So, I mean, they didn't wanna do that. I mean, they wanted to get the road vacated first, then they'd address the easement request for utilities and emergency services vehicles. Then they would address the vacation of the utilities and move the utilities to an appropriate spot based on where that easement is on the north side of that lot 3.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
You bet.
Thank you, sir. This question relates to the legal sufficiency of the petition, and just by way of background, even though it isn't provided in statute, our case law in the state of South Dakota has placed a restriction on vacations, and that restriction is that the vacation cannot be for purely private purposes. And so I was wondering if someone might be able to speak to the public purpose served by the vacation, be it for the public welfare. I notice in the petition there's reference to it closing off a dead-end street, and if there could be any mention of exactly, how that vacation would serve the public purpose, or, how this vacation serves public welfare, public safety, any of those concerns, that would be greatly appreciated, because as the South Dakota Supreme Court has said, that has to be the rationale employed in making a vacation.
Could
That's the
you
concern.
argue that by leaving that road there, the city's taking its time and effort to plow roads that don't need to be plowed? And secondly, just the overall safety of the city employees when they're down there turning around in an area that's at the end of a lake that's next down. I mean, because we look and go, well, we could either plow right to the edge there and be done, or we're going to have to go down and plow another 200 feet every time it snows. Plus, we have to maintain that road that's basically a private road for one person.
And you'll be turning around on private property when at that point as well, which I'm sure is what's been happening. But that's the intent. So, I mean, you wouldn't have to pave that road, do any improvements to that road. There would be no requirement for improvements on the bay side for any of that as well. So, but I mean, there's just a progression in what the owners wanted to do. And to reference what Mr. Stonebarger was talking about, getting the cart before the horse, this is the best way that the property owners felt to approach this in an effort to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish.
I only put that out there just in terms of legal sufficiency, making sure we get the minutes on that.
So, really, there isn't adequate right-of-way there to do a full-fledged road to what we would normally hold as a city standard either. I just want to make that point, that for us to maintain that, regardless of where the roadway ends, if the roadway ends here where they're proposing, or whether it ends down here, we have the same challenge to turn around our equipment regardless of location. So from that standpoint, we're on equal footing with or without a vacation. We're gonna need to be able to turn our equipment around using some type of easement on private property to get adequate service. So I just want that to be a matter of point.
And the other part that's on there is if it were left and we couldn't get the road vacated, what would be the recourse if there were two homes built out there? I mean, then you have two properties with no access for turnaround, and then you're required to do the maintenance and repair and all of that on an unimproved road as well.
So with that, I guess I have no more comments.
Thank you.
I can answer questions.
Well, if that did remain a public road and it became developed, and there was the turnaround issue, if the city owns that property on the peninsula, if I'm understanding that correctly,
No, okay.
where
right
the
here is-
public access to the lake is, that's,
Right.
okay.
That's just a dead end. Everything else outside of that is waters of the state. Everything below ordinary high water is waters of the state.
Waters of the state. The
So-
city doesn't own the city doesn't own the gap in between the two roads.
Correct.
Between what two roads, I'm sorry?
There's a roadway down here that comes up and dead ends right here.
Oh, and I'm talking about the public access area.
Right.
That's owned by the city?
Everything if we were at high water, ordinary high water, wherever the water's edge is where the rights of the city and of any property adjacent to that ends, and the state jurisdiction takes over. So this happens to be in a photo that's probably a little bit in a lower water condition. I would dare say that the water, when it's full, would essentially come up to about the end of this, and you wouldn't see this little sandbar right here. But I mean, I don't have elevation data to prove that with a drawing like this, but I guess my point is that we're going to have issues and challenges turning our equipment around, whether or not the right-of-way ends right at the end of the property line, or if it ended 2 lots north.
Yeah, I guess what I was getting at is, even though it is deemed a public access to the lake, how viable of a public access to the lake is it?
It is not improved at all. A kayak, a canoe, maybe a very, very, very small boat that you could manhandle out of there, but there's no parking, there's no ramp, there's virtually no improvement. It's as rough as and archaic as it gets.
And right now, we're turning our equipment around on private property without an easement.
Correct.
Whereas if we vacate this, we'll actually have built an easement for our property to turn around on, which makes us a little more legal. One advantage to the city to vacate it is we're gonna develop an easement that we currently don't have.
Correct.
With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for motion in a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. McGuire. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Stein, discussion. I see what you're saying, John. How do we move it forward? What you wanted, I think the city says, yeah, we own that land, but we have no intention to do anything with it. But we also don't want to get in the habit of whole scale giving away public accesses or future public accesses.
As long as the public's informed and they don't have a problem, that's fine. But I don't think.
How can we wordsmith our
limited
ordinance to make
process
sure
here,
that it happens?
We haven't informed the public.
Shane, I have a question for you. Is there a public hearing? It goes first and second reading to the council?
No.
From here?
No, from here, it's a one meeting, verification or ratification of your recommendation that goes to the council, and the council can either ratify whatever motion you bring forward out of this process, or with a majority vote, they can overturn or change the motion, as I understand it. So
The resolution.
So, yes. So, going forward, if this was approved, it would go forward to the council, and the council could have another public hearing and proceed to make the final authorization.
So the council will have one public hearing on this.
Correct.
No, we haven't, but you can modify the motion. There was two conditions of the vacation that were asked for. One was to establish a turnaround area for city vehicles, and the second was to establish a utility easement. What would happen with that is the easement, we'd establish a utility easement. Once the utilities are out of that easement area, they'd have to come back to us again to vacate the easement. You like to change your motion? We probably didn't mention that in there.
Yeah, I'd like to change that
Just-
to include a turnaround for access for the city and the
Utility easement.
utilities easement.
And Mark, your second? Second. Motion by Mr. McGuire, second by Mr. Stein. Any way, Shane, we can make sure that in that public hearing at the city council that it's known that it is city property and it is accessible to Lake Kempesca from where it's at? Other than what's already been done, or has that already been set out?
Well, anybody
Facebook.
that watches this proceeding
We'll see it.
now is noticed, I guess.
And the press will too.
Yeah, so.
And just to clarify the record here, Mr. Chairman, SDCL 945-9, which governs the hearing and the approval of a vacation, requires a 2/3 vote of the governing body, not a majority vote. So a 2/3 vote of the city council to declare a resolution to vacate passed.
Any other questions? Discussion? With that, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, any old business? Nothing on the table? New business? Need a motion to adjourn? Sure. Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor,